How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holcman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holcman.
Welcome to this edition of Real Talk. I'm Sam Holcman. Thanks for tuning in. And the topic for this particular broadcast is getting ready for AI, or continuing to work on AI, or recognizing that you've got to have a foundation before you start using AI. And basically that foundation is data. So you're going to lay the foundation as an architect, specifically an enterprise architect, and within that field, a data architect, to be able to have a solid foundation in order to use the AI engine. Because as we all know, AI is made up of fundamentally two things: some kind of a processing engine, and what it's processing, of course, is the data. And of course, the best time to start looking at this is when that data comes into your organization. And some people look at it as, well, nobody wants to do that stuff. Well, an analogy one of my colleagues said, nobody wants to maintain the plumbing. But if you don't maintain the plumbing, and there's a problem, it gets real messy. Well, it's the same thing, unfortunately, with data, but you can't see the mess. And as a matter of fact, with all these phrases being used right now with AI, hallucinations, and that word troubles me greatly as a professional. The correct word is mistakes. I think if we use that word mistakes, we'd have a little bit more action there. So within that understanding, what we need to do is to build one version of the truth of what that data is, one source, and have that accessible to all of the relevant people within your organization. As you know from our previous broadcasts, we're not really hot on public data. I've talked about in other broadcasts the 4 categories of data that's out there, the most important of which is not on the internet. The internet does not have best practices. The internet has published practices. No best practices are going to be on the internet. Nobody would do that. Think about it in your own company. So the real good data that you need is actually within your organization. So you're going to build that foundation within your organization, as quickly as possible. One version of the truth. If you want to talk about cleaning that up, to have that understanding, the names, the structure, the format, none of that is complicated. You just got to get started. And when you want to get started? Monday morning, so to speak. And you're going to keep doing that, because more and more data is going to come into your organizations. And also becomes the common vocabulary for your organization, which is another benefit from the stakeholders and the business people. One common vocabulary. You start understanding what each element is and what it means to people. Don't look at common dictionaries for that, or reference models, because you are unique. You have your own DNA. Your organization has its own DNA. And the terms that it uses are your own that's there. And of course, one of the issues is there are many sources within your own organization. And there's some nasty phrases people use. Well, we've got siloed data. Well, you know what? We can keep looking out the rearview mirror and, wringing our hands. But you know why the rearview mirror is smaller than the front windshield? Because you got to sort of stop looking at the rearview mirror, looking for blame, and let's look forward and say, well, from this point on, we're going to build a data environment that our AI engines can actually use to enable our business and mission strategy and get that competitive advantage. And within that, you'll start talking about, well, how do you store this stuff? Where do you store it? A lot of organizations use a multi-tier environment. We store it in low-cost areas, medium-cost areas, high-cost areas, like cloud, very expensive. Or you have accessibility as the criteria, in other words, the speed of accessibility. So there's a number of tiers that you can actually have this to optimize what's going on. All of that involves, architecture. And we start by actually looking at the goals that you're trying to achieve and start building that data structure from there. You know when you should get started? Last Monday morning. You know when you can get started? Next Monday morning. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holcman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.